I had freshly fallen in love with Jesus. I say freshly fallen in love because there is a sense in which I have loved Jesus as long as I can remember. It's just that during my 3rd year in university, something happened. And there was a passion for Jesus I had not known before. It was an invigorating time in my life, full of joy and newness of life. And my fellow physics and math students could see it. Apparently, it radiated from me. So much so that many of them asked if I would meet after class to help them understand why I was feeling so alive. In those afternoon and evening conversations, my fellow students pressed me hard. Why Jesus? Why love Jesus? What is so special about Jesus? What makes Jesus any more important than any other religious or philosophical figure? One day, the professor who was teaching us thermodynamics, which is the study of heat and energy transfer, asked if he could meet with me. I was one of 3 or 4 students whom he had taken under wing. He had been trying to get me a summer internship at the Plasma Institute of Physics in Berlin. I shared with him what was happening in my life, and I shared with him this growing tug to leave the university, go to seminary, and prepare for the preaching ministry. And he asked me, in all seriousness, why would you throw away your brains and your promising future to preach Jesus? Even then, I knew that there are a number of significant things that set Jesus apart. But thanks to my Sunday school upbringing in the Baptist General Conference, I knew that there was one thing that put Jesus in a class all by himself. Jesus of Nazareth, son of Mary, is the living God in human form. Jesus is the Creator become a creature. At least, that is what the church claims. For centuries, the church has proclaimed that the God who made the world came down to live in the world as one of us. That claim generated all the intense theological controversies of the first 4 centuries of church history. That claim and the attempt to unpack it lays at the heart of the so-called ecumenical creeds. Thus, the Nicene Creed, which Christians of all denominational stripes recite, saying of Jesus that he is God of God, light of light, very God of very God. The World Council of Churches, in its first council meeting in Amsterdam in 1948, found its unity in the affirmation, Jesus Christ is Savior and God. But the question began to haunt me. Did Jesus of Nazareth himself ever make such a claim? Did he think he is God? So, along with textbooks on quantum mechanics and differential equations, I decided to plow through the New Testament. As I did, it appeared to me that the writers of the New Testament believed that Jesus was divinity in some sort, some form. The Apostle John, for instance, says so right up front. In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. The Apostle Paul seems as forthright. As a science student, I was particularly drawn to his epistle to the Colossians. In that epistle, he says things like, Jesus is the image of the invisible God. By him and for him, all things are created. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. In him all the fullness of deity dwells in bodily form. I was further taken by the fact that the New Testament authors give to Jesus names and titles which the Old Testament only gives to the living God, to the Creator. For instance, Jesus is called the Holy One and Lord. As I read the New Testament, I saw that Jesus performs deeds and functions which only the Old Testament God performs. Jesus forgives sins. Jesus raises the dead. Jesus stills raging storms on the Sea of Galilee. And Jesus makes people's response to them the basis of their eternal destination. Furthermore, I noticed that Jesus was worshipped. He was given the kind of praise and adoration which only God deserves. He gives sight to a blind man, and the blind man worships him. I was especially impressed by the fact that when doubting Thomas fell at the feet of Jesus and said, "My Lord and my God," Jesus did not rebuke him. Jesus did not charge him with idolatry or blasphemy. Jesus accepted Thomas' worship. But the question still haunted me. Did Jesus of Nazareth himself, did the carpenter from Galilee, did the flesh and blood human being whom other flesh and blood human beings touched, did he himself ever say anything remotely like, "I am the living God"? The question intensified for me because of the emergence of the rock opera Jesus Christ Superstar. The question now sang in my soul. Jesus Christ Superstar, who are you? What do you say you are? Jesus Christ Superstar, who are you? What do you say you are? Jesus Christ Superstar, who are you? What do you say you are? So crucial did all of this seem to me that I decided to reread the four Gospels with the one question in mind. Now, to my good fortune, I begin with the Gospel according to John. And as I read and reread John, I found myself drawn to chapters 7 and 8 of his Gospel. And whenever I spent time in those chapters, I felt as if I ought to take off my shoes, that I was on holy ground. In these chapters, Jesus makes audacious, truly audacious claims about himself. Claims which caused the religious authorities to finally ask Jesus, John 8:25, "Who are you?" And John 8:53, "Whom do you make yourself out to be?" I notice that John is careful to tell us his readers, that these enormous claims are made in the context of the Jewish Feast of Tabernacles. So, I set out to get my hands on everything I could in order to understand this Jewish feast. And when I did, Jesus' words in John 7 and 8 came alive in me. I should say they exploded in me. His words took on meaning, and I found an answer to my question, which I now want to give you. If I could only preach one sermon to the whole world, it would be this one. There are three feasts which those living within 15 miles of Jerusalem were obligated to attend. They are Passover, Pentecost, and Tabernacles. Tabernacles was by far the most joyous, and it took place about mid-October. Jerusalem overflowed by very happy pilgrims. Those who came to the Feast of Tabernacles would live in little huts or tents made of tree branches, which in Hebrew are called succoth. Thus, this feast is also called by that name, Succoth. The worshippers did this as a way to recall the days when their ancestors lived in tents or huts as they made their way across the Sinai Desert to the Promised Land. Now, the Feast of Tabernacles is very rich in symbolism, ritual, and theology. There are three major components. There is a water ceremony